You'll step back from client management. Effective now. It's a realignment. Be professional.
I'll babysit your accounts for stability. 7 patents. Register to me.
You're bluffing.
Read, slowly.
We can fix this title board seat.
I'm not a title, I'm the yield.
You owe the family.
I repaid the loan the day I was born. Heather, dear, hand over the client files.
They're not files. They're relationships.
You're unstable. Clients deserve stability with me.
400 million? On weekends?
Cute fantasy.
Average 17%.
Average 17%. Ask your donors why they call
Put the money back. Vice Chairman?
5 million wired. Henderson saved. That buys you time, not control.
30 days, then we talk.
Correction,
I'm Heather, 32 years old, and for the last 8 years, I've been the quiet engine powering my family's multi-million-dollar finance firm. After a quarter where my division single-handedly generated 62% of the company's profits, this was supposed to be the meeting where they finally saw my value. But instead of a promotion, my phone buzzed with a group text from my own father. A message for everyone to see. It read, "We think you should step away from client management for now." 8 years of my life, of fixing my cousin's screw-ups, erased with a thumbs-up emoji from my aunt. The betrayal was so deep it left me completely numb. What they didn't know was that my stepping away also included my personal $5.9 million contribution to the family fund. If you've ever been completely undervalued by the very people who should build you up, let me know where you're watching from. And be sure to subscribe, because you are going to want to witness this. While my family saw me as the dependable but unremarkable daughter, the financial world, it saw something else entirely. At Miller Financial, my name became a quiet legend among the people who actually mattered. The clients, the ones with portfolios in the 8 and 9 figures. They didn't call the main line asking for my father or for Jake. They called my direct extension. They knew who was making them money. I was the one who could explain complex derivatives markets in a way that made sense. Who could spot an undervalued tech stock 6 months before Wall Street caught on? Last quarter, when my father toasted to a record-breaking team effort, the reality was that 62% of that record, it came from my division, from strategies I developed, from the relationships I built. My life became a carefully balanced act of 2 separate realities. During the day, I was Heather Miller, the dutiful employee, sitting in meetings where my ideas were tabled, only to be represented by Jake a month later as his own brilliant insight. I'd just nod and add a supporting comment, because making waves was discouraged. The Miller way was about maintaining a united front, and my father valued the appearance of harmony over the reality of performance. So, I played the part. I let them believe Jake was a rainmaker. I let them think my success was just a happy byproduct of the company's solid, traditional foundation. But when 5 o'clock hit, and my family left for steak dinners or weekends at the lake house, my real work began. I didn't go home to a small apartment like they all assumed. I didn't live the life of a single woman just scraping by in Boston. That was the image they held of me, and I never corrected it. Their ignorance was my greatest asset. My evenings and weekends weren't for dating or brunch with friends. They were for building my arc, my escape plan. 4 years ago, after a particularly brutal meeting where my father called my quantitative analysis academic nonsense, I took the bonus I had earned and did something just for me. I quietly filed the paperwork for a separate entity, a company with a name that didn't include Miller. I called it Apex Capital Management. It was my sandbox, my laboratory, a place where I could implement all the strategies my family was too afraid or too arrogant to try. I started with my own money. Every spare dollar I had went into Apex. While Jake was leasing a new Porsche every year on the family's dime, I was driving a 10-year-old Honda and pouring my cash into my own venture. I took meetings in quiet coffee shops, building a client base from scratch. These weren't Miller Financial clients. I was meticulous about that line. These were people who had heard of me through word of mouth, startup founders and angel investors who didn't care about a family name. They cared about results. And I gave them results. The kind of explosive growth Miller Financial hadn't seen in decades. My work became my obsession. On Saturdays, while my family was posting photos from their yacht, I was holed up in my home office, reverse engineering market trends and developing proprietary trading algorithms. These weren't just hobbies. They were weapons. I filed patents for every single one of them. 7 of them. Legally registered to me, Heather Miller, not to the family business. They were my intellectual property, built on my time, with my own resources. And then there was my home. They all thought I still lived in that little one-bedroom apartment I rented after college. I let them think that. It was easier. The truth was, 2 years ago, I used the profits from Apex Capital to buy a 4-story brownstone in Back Bay, one of Boston's most exclusive neighborhoods. I purchased it under an LLC to keep my name off the public records. I renovated it from top to bottom, installing a state-of-the-art home office with secure servers and a direct fiber line to the stock exchange. This wasn't just a house. It was a command center, a fortress of solitude where I was building an empire they knew nothing about. The numbers were staggering, even to me. My personal investment portfolio, completely separate from the family fund, had quietly grown to $17 million. $17 million. Meanwhile, my contributions to the family fund, the money they all took for granted, stood at $4.2 million. They saw the $4.2 million as my entire net worth. They had no idea it was just a fraction. A decoy. They were so blinded by their perception of me as the little girl who was good with numbers, they never bothered to look closer. They never asked the right questions. They just saw what they wanted to see. And that was their fatal mistake. The shift was subtle at first. So subtle, I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. It started about 2 months ago. The atmosphere in the office, an environment I knew better than my own home, began to feel different, colder. There was a strange energy in the monthly family meetings, a tension that hadn't been there before. People stopped making eye contact with me. When I spoke, the silence that followed felt heavier, charged with unspoken thoughts. My contributions, which were usually met with at least polite nods, now seemed to hang in the air before dissipating into nothing. It was like I was speaking a language no one else understood anymore. Or perhaps, a language no one wanted to understand. Then came the weird questions, usually cornering me by the coffee machine or in the hallway. They were always casual, wrapped in a friendly tone, but the inquiries themselves were oddly specific. My cousin Jake, with that smug grin he always wore, leaned against my office door one afternoon. "Hey, Heather," he said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Just curious, you ever think about, doing your own thing? Going solo?" I just raised an eyebrow and replied that I was happy where I was, but the question stuck with me. It wasn't a friendly hypothetical. It felt like he was probing, like he was checking for something. A week later, my father called me into his office. He was looking at spreadsheets on his monitor and didn't bother to turn around. "Heather," he said, his voice flat, "it needs to do a full system backup. I need admin access to all your client files. Just a formality." I'd been at the firm for 8 years. We had a dedicated IT department that handled backups automatically. They never needed my personal admin access. It felt wrong. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I felt a prickle of suspicion, but I pushed it down. This was my father. This was my family. "Paranoia," I told myself. "You're just stressed." So, I complied. I gave him the access, a decision I would come to regret with every fiber of my being. The final warning sign came during a client dinner with the Donovans, one of my oldest and most profitable accounts. Jake insisted on coming along, which was unusual. Throughout the dinner, he kept interrupting me, redirecting Mr. Donovan's questions to himself, and speaking about my strategies as if they were his own. My father just sat there, nodding approvingly. He watched his own daughter being actively undermined and did nothing. I felt a profound sense of isolation wash over me. It was in that moment, sitting in that fancy restaurant, that I realized I wasn't just being ignored anymore. I was being erased. They were systematically phasing me out, right in front of my own eyes. I had a terrible, sinking feeling that something big was coming. I just had no idea how public and how brutal it would be. The end of my life at Miller Financial didn't come with a formal meeting or a respectful conversation behind closed doors. It didn't come with a severance package or a thank you for my years of service. It came on a Friday afternoon at 3:17 p.m. in the form of a notification from our family's WhatsApp group. I was in my office finalizing the quarterly performance reports, the very reports that showed my division carrying the entire company, when my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting a picture of my cousin's new baby or a golf score from my uncle. Instead, I saw a block of text from my father, sent to the entire family, every aunt, uncle, and cousin. The message read, "After considerable discussion among the senior family members, we think it would be best if Heather steps away from client management for now. We appreciate her background work, but recent feedback suggests clients respond better to our traditional approach. This isn't permanent, just a chance to realign with the Miller way of doing things." I stared at the screen, the words blurring together. My blood ran cold. Background work. Traditional approach. It was corporate jargon for "you're out." And then the replies started trickling in, one by one, like nails being hammered into a coffin. My Uncle Richard. Completely agree. Smart move. My Aunt Patricia, the one who'd praised my performance just last week, responded with a single, brutal emoji. A thumbs up. My cousin Jake, of course, was next. Happy to take over her accounts in the transition. Even my mother chimed in with a weak, placating message. We only want what's best for everyone. No one objected. No one defended me. No one even bothered to send me a private message asking if I was okay. In the space of 30 seconds, my entire professional life was dismantled, publicly, by the people I shared blood with. Years of 60-hour work weeks, of sacrificing my personal life, of generating millions of dollars for them. All of it meant nothing. I was an inconvenience to be handled, a problem to be solved via group text. An odd sense of calm washed over me, the kind of calm that comes after a devastating storm, when you're left standing in the wreckage and realize there's nothing left to lose. I waited exactly 17 minutes. I watched as more supportive messages appeared from various family members. Then I picked up my phone. My fingers moved with a strange, detached precision. I typed a short, professional reply. Understood. I'll respect that decision and step away from the family fund too. Wishing everyone continued success. I hit send. Then I put my phone on silent, face down on my desk. I swiveled my chair to my computer and logged into the banking portal for our family fund. As a major contributor and one of the fund administrators, I had full access. A few clicks. That's all it took. I initiated the withdrawal of my entire contribution, $4.2 million, plus the accrued growth attributable to my investments, which added another $1.7 billion, a total of $5.9 million. The system prompted me with a final question. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I clicked confirm. I had just closed my laptop, a strange feeling of emptiness and liberation warring inside me, when my phone lit up. Not a call, a direct message. It was from Uncle Richard. My curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. The message was a single, furious line of text. Aston Martin transaction declined. What the hell did you just do to the fund account, Heather? I'm at the dealership. Fix this mess. Now. I read it once, then twice. My vision narrowed. A hot, white-hot rage, purer than anything I had ever felt, surged through me. It wasn't just about being fired by text message anymore. It was this raw, unfiltered entitlement. They hadn't even waited a full business day. They had immediately tried to use the money I had earned, the money that formed the liquid backbone of that fund, to buy a $200,000 luxury car. My dismissal wasn't a business decision to them. It was a celebration, a chance to finally spend the profits without having to listen to the person who actually generated them. The mess he wanted me to fix wasn't a company problem. It was the temporary inconvenience of his shopping trip being interrupted. My existence, my contribution, had been reduced to an ATM for their whims. And when the ATM was empty, it was my fault. A mess I needed to clean up. At this point, I don't really know what word describes the feeling. After years of sacrifice, this is what my family did. This is who they are. If you're feeling as disgusted as I am right now, help me out and comment one word to describe this family's actions. Because that single text message, it clarified everything. Any lingering doubt, any shred of sentimentality I had for the family business, it all evaporated in that moment. I didn't reply. I simply took a screenshot of the message, saved it to a secure cloud folder labeled leverage, and shut my phone off. This was no longer just about leaving. This was about making them understand, in no uncertain terms, exactly what they had just thrown away. And I was going to make sure the lesson was a painful one. After reading my uncle's text message about the Aston Martin, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. All the years of hurt, of frustration, of hoping for a crumb of recognition, it all vanished. And in its place, a profound, chilling clarity settled in. There were no tears. There was no screaming into a pillow. The emotional part of my brain just shut down. It was replaced by a cold, calculating machine. The part of me that could analyze a market, identify a weakness, and execute a strategy without sentiment. For my entire life, I had separated my emotions from my work. Now, for the first time, I was turning that ruthless focus onto my own family. I sat there in the silence of my office, the city lights of Boston beginning to twinkle outside my window. My phone was still dark on the desk. I didn't need to see it. I could feel the frantic energy starting to build across town. The confusion, the irritation. Soon it would turn to panic. But I felt none of it. I felt a strange sense of peace, the peace that comes from absolute certainty. For years I had been playing a game where the rules were rigged against me. I kept playing, thinking that if I just worked harder, scored more points, they would eventually have to acknowledge the win. Now I realized they would never change the rules. They would just keep moving the goalposts. The only way to win was to quit their game and start my own. My internal monologue was no longer a plea for acceptance. It was a declaration of war. A single thought repeated itself in my mind, over and over again, like a mantra. Enough. No more second chances. No more benefit of the doubt. This is it. The end. They would not get another ounce of my talent, my time, or my money. They would learn what the Miller name was worth without me. The pain I felt hadn't disappeared. It had simply transmuted. It had become fuel. A cold, clean-burning energy that was now powering every decision I was about to make. I didn't storm out of the office. I didn't send a furious, multi-paragraph text message detailing their years of disrespect. That would have been emotional. That would have been what they expected. Instead, I acted with the quiet efficiency of a bomb squad technician. Every move was deliberate, precise, and executed in complete silence. My first action was to pack my personal belongings from my desk. Not much. A framed photo of my college graduation, one they hadn't attended, a favorite coffee mug, and a small plant. As I walked out of the Miller financial offices for what I knew would be the last time, no one said a word. The few remaining employees just averted their eyes. The news had clearly already spread. I was now a ghost in the machine I had helped build. The drive home to my brownstone in Back Bay was surreal. The city buzzed around me, oblivious. People were heading to dinner, laughing, living their lives, while my entire world had just been irrevocably altered. But instead of grief, I felt powerful. I was no longer a passenger in my own life. I was in the driver's seat. I pulled into my private garage, the door closing behind me, sealing me off from the world. My fortress. My command center. This was where the real work would begin. I walked straight past my beautiful, comfortable living room. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't pour myself a drink. I went directly to my home office, a room they didn't even know existed. I sat down in my leather chair, the glow of 6 monitors illuminating my face. This was my real office, the place where I was truly in control. I powered on my phone, not to read their messages, but to use it as a tool. My first call was not to a friend or a family member. It was to my personal attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer named Marcus Thorne. Not Jonathan, the family's lawyer who had been on their payroll for 30 years. Marcus was mine. Marcus, I said, my voice even and steady. It's happening. I need you to prepare the official separation documents, and I need you to review the personal service clauses in the 17 client contracts I sent you last month. I anticipate a hostile reaction. There was a pause on the other end. I've been waiting for this call, Heather, he said. The documents are ready. I'll have them filed first thing Monday morning. My next move was digital. I opened my encrypted laptop and composed an email to my small, loyal team at Apex Capital Management, my secret company. The subject line was simple: meeting, Monday, 8 a.m. The body of the email was just as brief. Prepare for accelerated growth, full briefing on Monday. New opportunities are on the horizon. They were the best in the business, handpicked by me, and they operated under strict NDAs. They knew I had another life at Miller Financial, but they didn't know the details. They were about to. Then I turned my attention to the evidence. For years, I had been meticulously documenting everything. Every idea of mine that Jake later claimed as his own, with dated emails to prove it. Every strategy I developed on my own time, using my own resources, with timestamps and digital breadcrumbs leading back to my personal servers, not Miller Financial's. Every time my father took credit for my team's performance in board meetings, I had the minutes saved. It was all there. A digital arsenal, locked away for a day I hoped would never come. But it had. I organized it all into a single encrypted file labeled insurance. My final act of the night was the most important. I walked to the custom-built safe hidden behind a painting in my study. I spun the dial, the soft clicks echoing in the quiet room. Inside were the hard copies of the most critical documents, the 7 original patent certificates for my financial algorithms, all registered solely in my name. The signed contracts with the personal service clauses, legally binding agreements that tied some of Miller Financial's biggest clients directly to me, not the firm. The incorporation papers for my LLCs, the deeds to my properties, the statements for my $17 million personal portfolio. I laid them all out on my large oak desk. It was more than just paper. It was a visual representation of my secret life, my independence, my power. This was my leverage. My family thought they had just cut a branch off the family tree. They had no idea they had just sawed through the trunk of a completely different, much larger tree that was about to fall directly on top of them. I hadn't planned this as an attack. I had built it as a defense, a lifeboat. But now, seeing it all laid out before me, I realized it was more than a lifeboat. It was a battleship. And I was about to set sail. I put everything back in the safe, turned off the lights, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I went to bed knowing exactly what the future held. It held a reckoning, and it was going to start on Monday morning. The weekend was a symphony of their panic, playing out on my phone's lock screen. I didn't answer a single call or text, but I saw the snippets. The progression from confusion to anger to sheer, unadulterated terror was almost clinical to observe. My father's initial texts were demanding. "Heather, call me immediately. This is unacceptable." By Saturday morning, after a night of silence from me, the tone shifted. "The bank has frozen the entire fund due to suspicious activity. You need to reverse this now. The Henderson deal is on the line." The Henderson deal. A $20 million commercial real estate project, the biggest deal of the year for the family. A potential $3 million profit. A profit that was contingent on a down payment from the family fund. A fund that I had just gutted. Their desperation was a rising tide, and I just watched, silent and unmoved, from my island of calm. But the moment that truly galvanized me, the moment that burned away any last lingering molecule of doubt, came on Saturday evening. I was trying to have a quiet dinner, the first real moment of peace I'd had in months, when a call came through from an unknown number. Usually, I'd ignore it. But a gut feeling, a cold premonition, made me answer. "Hello?" I said. The voice on the other end was familiar and warm, but laced with concern. "Heather, it's David Donovan." My heart skipped a beat. David wasn't just my biggest client. He was a mentor, a friend. I had managed his family's wealth for years. "Mr. Donovan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's so good to hear from you. Is everything all right?" There was a pause. "Well, I was hoping you could tell me that," he said slowly. "I just had a very peculiar call from your father, Robert. He told me you were going through a rather serious personal crisis." His words. "He said you might be making some erratic decisions with client portfolios." He then strongly, and I mean strongly, suggested that I transfer my account to your cousin, Jake, just for the time being. To, and I quote, "ensure stability until you were feeling better." The world went silent. The sounds of the city outside my window faded away. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This wasn't about money or a job. This was a character assassination. My own father had picked up the phone, called my most important client, and tried to poison a relationship I had spent nearly a decade building. He had used lies, vicious, calculated lies, to paint me as unstable, all to claw back control. The rage I felt was nothing like the hot flash of anger from the day before. This was different. It was a glacial fury, immense and unstoppable. In that moment, he had ceased to be my father. He had become my adversary. I took a deep, steadying breath. "David," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I can assure you there is no personal crisis. There is, however, an internal business restructuring. What my father told you was a malicious falsehood, and it was profoundly unprofessional. Your investments are, and always have been, perfectly safe. I am in full control." I could hear the relief in his sigh. "Thank God, Heather." I thought as much. It didn't sound like you at all. "You do what you need to do, young lady. My portfolio isn't going anywhere." We hung up, and I sat there in the dark, the phone still clutched in my hand. The game had changed. They weren't just trying to push me out anymore. They were trying to destroy my reputation on their way down. The meeting on Monday was no longer a negotiation. It was going to be an execution. At precisely 8:59 a.m. on Monday, I opened my front door. All of them were there. My father, Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, and Jake, the family's senior leadership. They looked tired, stressed, and angry. They filed into my home, and I watched their expressions shift as they took in their surroundings. The original artwork on the walls, the high-end furnishings, the sheer scale of the space. I could see the gears turning in their heads, their long-held image of me as the struggling niece shattering in real time. I led them to my dining room, where I had set up the table like a boardroom. I remained standing at the head of the table, a position my father always occupied. He noticed. He said nothing. "We're here to resolve this situation, Heather," my father began, his voice strained. "The Henderson deal." I raised my hand, cutting him off, a gesture I had learned from him. "Before we discuss any specific deals," I said, my voice even and controlled, "we need to address the larger situation." "This is ridiculous!" Uncle Richard burst out, his face already turning red. "You're holding the family hostage over a bruised ego." "This isn't about ego, Uncle Richard," I replied, turning my cold gaze on him. "This is about value." And then I began the presentation I had been preparing my entire life for. For 8 years, I have been treated as an asset to be exploited, not a partner to be respected. I was removed from my role via a group text, based on lies. So, I removed my assets. It's really quite simple. "Whatever mistakes we've made," my father pleaded, "this response is disproportionate. You've put a $3 million profit in jeopardy." "A $3 million profit," I countered. "That was apparently contingent on my money, yet a deal I was never important enough to be included in. Interesting, isn't it?" Jake snorted. "Oh, come on, Heather. This is all so dramatic. Let's be realistic. You need the Miller name as much as we need your number crunching. Where exactly do you think you're going to go?" And that was the opening I had been waiting for. A slow smile spread across my face. "That's an excellent question, Jake," I said. "That brings us to the next item on our agenda." I pressed a small remote in my hand. The large 85-inch television on the dining room wall, which they had probably assumed was just for decoration, flickered to life. A sleek professional logo appeared on the screen. It read, "Apex Capital Management." I have been operating my own investment firm as a separate entity for the past 4 years, I explained as a new slide appeared, showing a growth chart that arced towards the ceiling. The air in the room became thick with shock. "My personal clients have enjoyed average returns of 17%, compared to the 9% here at Miller Financial." "That's not possible," my father whispered, his face ashen. "You've been working full-time at our firm. When would you have had the time?" "Evenings, weekends, the vacation days I never took," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "While you were all at the lake house, I was building an empire." I clicked the remote again. The next slide showed a list of 7 patents. "I also hold 7 patents for proprietary financial algorithms and trading systems, all registered to me, personally, not to Miller Financial." Another click. A list of high net worth clients appeared, none of whom were from the Miller Financial roster. "Their combined assets under my management," I said, letting the words hang in the air, "total just over $400 million. Jake let out a low whistle that sounded like air escaping a punctured tire. I saved the best for last. "Furthermore," I said, advancing to the final devastating slide, 17 of your current Miller Financial clients have personal service agreements with me, specifically, with me." I slid a stack of documents across the polished table towards Jonathan, the family's shell-shocked attorney. "These contracts include clauses stating that if I leave the firm, they have the option to transfer their accounts to follow me. Those 17 clients represent approximately $230 million in assets under management." The room fell into a dead, suffocating silence. It was the sound of their world collapsing, the sound of their power, their arrogance, their control, evaporating into thin air. They hadn't just pushed out a disgruntled employee, they had pushed out their single greatest asset, and in doing so, had armed me with the power to dismantle their entire legacy. I hadn't come to this meeting to ask for my job back. I had come to show them who was really in charge. I stood there, in the silence, and let them absorb the full, catastrophic weight of their mistake. The game was over, and I had won. The silence that followed my final revelation was unlike any silence I had ever experienced. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was a physical presence. A heavy, crushing weight that seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. I watched their faces, one by one, as the full scope of their predicament crashed down on them. It was a fascinating study in the stages of grief, except what was dying wasn't a person, but their entire reality, their power, their control over me. First came the shock, a deep, profound disbelief. My father, a man I had always seen as an immovable force of nature, looked small. The color drained from his face, and he seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 seconds. He just stared at the television screen, at the Apex Capital Management logo, as if it were a ghost. He shook his head slowly, muttering something under his breath. No, that's not possible. My Uncle Richard's reaction was more visceral. His face went from red to a terrifying shade of purple. He looked like a pressure cooker about to explode. "This is a joke," he stammered, looking around the room for support. "This has to be some kind of sick joke. You can't just create a $400 million company on the side." Jake was the most transparent. His initial smugness had curdled into a sickly green shade of envy and fear. He let out a choked sound, a half laugh, half sob. $230 million, he whispered, the number hanging in the air like a death sentence. He wasn't thinking about the family. He was thinking about the accounts he was supposed to take over, the prestige he was about to inherit, all turning to dust before his eyes. And then, as the shock wore off, the panic set in. Raw, undiluted panic. It was my Aunt Patricia who broke first. Her carefully constructed facade of the calm, supportive matriarch crumbled. "The Henderson deal," she gasped, her voice shrill. "Robert, the Henderson deal closes tomorrow. We'll be ruined. We'll lose everything. The down payment, the reputation." That was the trigger. The mention of losing money, of losing face, sent a jolt through all of them. The dam broke. Suddenly, the room was filled with a cacophony of panicked voices all talking over each other. My father started frantically scrolling through his phone, probably trying to call the bank, his hands trembling so much he could barely type. Uncle Richard stood up, knocking his chair over. "This is extortion!" he roared, pointing a shaking finger at me. "This is illegal! We'll sue you! We'll sue you for everything you have!" I remained silent, standing at the head of the table, watching the chaos unfold. I didn't need to say a word. Their fear was my victory speech. They finally understood. They hadn't just lost an employee. They hadn't just lost a chunk of the family fund. They had lost the one person who was holding the entire fragile structure together. And they were terrified of what would happen when it all came crashing down. When it became clear that raw panic and empty threats weren't working, their tactics shifted. The second phase began. The desperate, clumsy attempts at manipulation and blame. They turned on me, not as a united front, but as a pack of cornered animals, each trying a different line of attack. Jake, predictably, went for the personal jab. He pointed at me, his face twisted in a sneer. "So this is what it's all about, huh?" he spat. "All of this destruction, just because your feelings got hurt? You got kicked out of the group chat, so you decided to blow up the whole family?" That's pathetic, Heather. Truly pathetic. He was trying to frame me as the emotional, irrational woman, the villain of the story. It was the only narrative he knew. He was trying to shrink my calculated, strategic move down to a simple, petty temper tantrum. Then came Aunt Patricia, switching from panic to saccharine sweetness so quickly it gave me whiplash. She walked around the table towards me, her hands outstretched as if to comfort a crying child. "Heather, dear," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Let's all just take a breath. We're family. We love you. We all say and do things we don't mean when we're stressed. Surely you can't mean to do this to us, to your own family. We've always supported you." The lie was so audacious that it was almost impressive. The woman who had given a thumbs up to my professional execution was now claiming to be my biggest supporter. It was a desperate, transparent play to appeal to a sense of loyalty she knew she had personally helped destroy. And finally, my father. He found his voice, and when he spoke, it was with the weary, condescending tone of a king offering a pardon to a rebellious peasant. He held up his hands, calling for silence. "All right. Enough," he said, looking directly at me. It was the first time he had made eye contact since I'd turned on the television. "You've made your point, Heather. You're upset. We understand. We admit, the communication was poorly handled." He paused, as if offering that meager admission was a grand concession. "So let's fix this. Put the money back. We can forget all of this drama. We'll tear up that group message. We'll give you a new title. Vice Chairman. How does that sound? We'll give you a seat on the board. We can make this right. We just need you to be a team player again." A team player. The words hung in the air. After everything, after the lies, the deceit, the attempt to sabotage my career, his solution was to offer me a better-sounding title, a fancier chair at the same broken table. He was bargaining. He still didn't get it. He thought this was a negotiation about my role within the company. He couldn't comprehend that this was a declaration of my independence from it. He wasn't seeing me as a person who had been wronged. He was seeing me as a problem to be managed, a fire to be put out so that business could continue as usual. He wasn't offering respect. He was offering a bribe. And it was the most insulting thing he had said all day. The silence stretched on as I let his pathetic offer hang in the air, allowing them all to see it for what it was, a desperate, last-ditch effort to put the genie back in the bottle. But it was far, far too late for that. I let my father's pathetic offer of a vice chairman title hang in the air, the silence amplifying its absurdity. I looked at each of them, at their desperate, pleading faces, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just finality. The emotional connection had been severed. All that remained was business. I finally broke the silence. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a surgeon's scalpel. "That's not on the table," I said, looking directly at my father. "My position at Miller Financial is not up for negotiation today. What is on the table is a solution to your immediate problem." I walked over to a sideboard and picked up a single folder I had prepared. I slid it onto the center of the table. "The Henderson deal," I stated. "You need $5 million by tomorrow morning or you default. A default that will not only cost you $3 million in profit, but will also irreparably damage the Miller reputation you all hold so dear." I paused, letting the reality of their situation sink in. "I am prepared to wire $5 million to the family fund, today, enough to cover the Henderson down payment with a buffer." A wave of visible relief washed over the room. My Aunt Patricia even let out a small sob. They thought they had won. They thought this was me caving. "However," I continued, my voice hardening slightly, "this will not be a contribution. This will be structured as a loan. A loan from my personal holdings via Apex Capital Management to the Miller Family Fund. It will come with a standard market interest rate of 7% and specific, non-negotiable repayment terms. Your attorney, Jonathan, can draw up the paperwork immediately. It's that. Or you let the Henderson deal collapse. The choice is yours. The relief in the room curdled into disbelief. A loan? My father asked, his voice cracking. You're going to charge your own family interest? This is a business transaction, I replied evenly, which is how you've always insisted we approach things. I am offering you financing on extremely short notice to save a valuable deal. Any other lender would charge you double, given the circumstances. This is, in fact, quite a generous offer. Uncle Richard looked like he was about to have a stroke, but Jonathan, their own lawyer, reluctantly nodded. She's right, Robert. Legally, it's a perfectly reasonable, even favorable, offer. My father studied me for a long moment, the calculations happening behind his eyes. He was weighing his pride against his practicality. Finally, he deflated. Fine, he said, the word barely a whisper. Jonathan, draw up the loan agreement. But I wasn't finished. That solves your immediate crisis, I said. Now, let's talk about the future. As of this moment, I am taking a 1-month formal leave of absence from Miller Financial to give everyone time to consider next steps. In 30 days, we will reconvene, and we will discuss one of two things: either my formal, permanent departure and the orderly transition of my 17 personal service clients to Apex Capital, or we discuss my return under a completely new agreement. An agreement that reflects my actual value, not the value you have assigned to me. Those are my terms. They are non-negotiable. For the first time in my entire life, I had set the terms. I wasn't asking. I was telling. I watched as the full weight of their powerlessness settled upon them. They had no cards left to play. They had to accept. After the loan documents were signed and the wire transfer was initiated, they filed out of my home, not as the powerful patriarchs of a financial dynasty, but as a defeated army in full retreat. As the last one walked out, I closed the heavy oak door behind them. The click of the lock was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my freedom. This was a huge, huge moment. For the first time, I had chosen myself over their approval. If you're proud of this decision and this powerful moment, drop a emoji in the comments to send some strength for the next step of this journey. The silence that followed their departure was profound. It wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. My phone, which had been a source of anxiety for so long, buzzed on the table. For a second, my heart seized, thinking it was one of them, trying again. But it wasn't. It was a text from a number I hadn't expected to see. My younger cousin, Amanda, the one who had been relegated to the marketing department, her architectural degree gathering dust, the one who, like me, had always been on the periphery. The message was simple. Just heard the earthquake from here. Good for you. They never deserved you. Coffee next week? A genuine smile, the first in what felt like a lifetime, spread across my face. I typed back a single word. Definitely. A few minutes later, another call came in. It was Marcus, my lawyer. Heather? He said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I just received a very flustered call from Jonathan. It seems the meeting went well. I chuckled. You could say that, Marcus. Thank you for having everything ready. The pleasure was all mine, he replied. It's not every day you get to witness a paradigm shift in real time. You handled that perfectly. Call me if you need anything at all. His words, his professional respect, felt more validating than any praise my father had ever given me. That evening, as I was finally allowing myself to relax, the doorbell rang. My security camera showed a delivery man with a large wicker basket. I cautiously opened the door. It was a magnificent gift basket, filled with gourmet foods and a bottle of expensive champagne. The card was small and elegant. It read, "Heard there was a disturbance in the force. Knew you'd come out on top. Always on your team. DD. David Donovan, my client, my friend." He had not only believed me, but he was actively celebrating my victory. I stood in my quiet house, surrounded by these small but powerful gestures of support: a simple text message, a professional validation, a thoughtful gift. It was in that moment that I realized the truth. For years, I had been trying to earn a seat at a family table where I was never truly welcome. But all that time, without even realizing it, I had been building my own table, surrounded by people who saw my worth from the very beginning, my family of choice. And that felt more real, more powerful, and more lasting than any bond based on blood alone. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I knew I wouldn't be walking it alone. 1 year later, the world looks very different. The 30-day leave of absence turned into a month of intense negotiations, all conducted through our lawyers. We met at a neutral location, a private room in a downtown hotel. They came to the table not with demands, but with a proposal: a complete restructuring of Miller Financial. They proposed the creation of a new autonomous division, Miller Capital Management, with me as president and CEO. It was a stunning concession. I didn't accept it outright. My lawyer and I spent a week tearing it apart and rebuilding it. We added clauses protecting my intellectual property, ensuring my division had its own separate profit-sharing structure, and establishing a merit-based succession plan for the entire company. No longer would seniority or last name be the deciding factor. Performance would. Only then did I agree. The transition wasn't seamless, but it was decisive. My independent company, Apex Capital, was officially merged, bringing my $400 million of assets under the new Miller Capital Management umbrella. All 17 of my personal service clients officially transferred over. The balance of power had permanently shifted. The impact on my family was significant. My cousin Jake, stripped of the unearned authority he'd always hidden behind, was demoted. He now reports to one of my top analysts, a brilliant young woman I hired straight out of Stanford. It's a daily lesson in humility for him. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle Richard lost their equal voting rights in the family fund. The new structure gives voting power proportional to one's capital contribution, which means my voice is now the loudest in the room. My father and I have found a new kind of relationship. It's not the warm father-daughter bond I once craved, but it's something real. It's built on a foundation of professional respect. One evening, months after the restructuring, he came into my office as I was reviewing quarterly reports. He just stood there for a moment, watching me. "Your grandfather," he said quietly. "He always used to say that the best legacy isn't preservation, it's evolution." I was so focused on preserving what he built that I almost destroyed it by resisting change. He looked me in the eye. "I was wrong, Heather. I'm proud of you." It was the validation I had waited my entire life to hear. It didn't magically heal all the wounds, but it was a start. As for the others, our interactions are polite, professional, and strictly limited to business. The emotional ties have been permanently severed. My life has blossomed in ways I never imagined. My cousin Amanda, inspired by my actions, quit the firm to finally pursue her dream of architecture. I was her first investor. My friendship with her is one of the most precious things in my life. I've taken vacations, real ones. I went to Italy for 2 weeks and didn't check my email once. My new team at Miller Capital Management is the best in the business, a true meritocracy built on talent and respect. We are shattering all previous performance records, and the Miller name, once a symbol of stagnation, is now synonymous with innovation. Looking back, the journey from being the undervalued daughter to the respected CEO wasn't easy. It required me to build leverage in silence, to be willing to burn everything to the ground, and to force a confrontation I would have preferred to avoid. But the most important lesson I learned wasn't about finance or business strategy. It was simpler and far more universal. Respect is not always freely given. Sometimes it must be demanded. Your worth is not determined by someone else's recognition of it, but by your own quiet knowledge of your value and your courage to stand firm in that knowledge, even if you have to stand alone. Have you ever had to take a difficult stand and set hard boundaries with the people who were supposed to support you the most? How did you navigate that painful but necessary conversation? I would be honored to hear your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and claiming your power. And please, share this with someone who might need a reminder of their own incredible worth today. Thank you for listening.